Good morning. Please take your seats. Thank you all for gathering with us this morning in person and online to pay tribute to our retiring brother, Justice of Appeal Nolan Bereaux, who retires on Thursday as the Senior Appeal Court Judge. We are especially pleased to welcome some of his family members to court today. This assembly takes place having been arranged with some reluctance on Justice Bereaux's part, since he did not want to be in the spotlight. In fact, he had to be cajoled into it. We did plan for contingencies, however, and eventually decided that if he did not turn up, we would carry on nonetheless. When he leaves us, he will have completed over 29 years of service on the bench. Of that time, 17 years were spent on the Court of Appeal bench. During this time, hundreds of cases were heard by him and judgments handed down. This in itself is a phenomenal achievement deserving of our recognition. Before his coming onto the bench, he had had a remarkable career as an attorney at law in the Solicitor General's Department, where he rose from the rank of State Counsel 1 to Deputy Solicitor General. He also acted as the Solicitor General. It can be firmly declared, therefore, that his entire working career has been spent in the service of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. For this sterling service, we today place on the record the appreciation of a grateful judiciary and country to Justice Bereaux. Justice Bereaux, it can be said, started off with at least 3 advantages in life. The first is that he grew up in a rural, close-knit community in a place located in the deep south of Trinidad, in Erin. The second is that he had the support of loving parents and siblings in a large, devout family. The third, I dare say, is he had the good fortune of attending a school named Presentation College. That is, the original one in San Fernando. This foundation placed him on a path to upward mobility. He grasped the opportunities provided to him, and he worked tirelessly to build his career with values of integrity, hard work, and humility as his core principles. I have come to know firsthand of his creed, having had the opportunity to work with him directly since 2020. But we worked together in the judiciary before that. Each case for Justice Bereaux was somebody's story. He took the view that each cause had to be examined carefully to see where the justice of the case lay. He took his time to ensure he had considered all of the arguments thoroughly. He would say, "We have to get it right." He agonized over sentences to ensure we were mindful of precedents, to ensure stability and consistency in the law. Where the outcome of a case might lead to particularly harsh consequences for the small litigant, he would look at a case from every angle to ensure that we did get it right. He was also not afraid to pen a dissent when he felt the majority had not appreciated a nuanced fact or argument. At the same time, he would not shy away from making difficult decisions where that is where the law led him to. We will hear about some of those cases today and in the days to come. In terms of his contribution to the judiciary, Nolan Bereaux will long be remembered as one of the finest writers to have ever graced the Trinidad and Tobago bench. His judgments were comprised of simple, clear, and declarative sentences. His judgments were no longer than they needed to be. They were well supported by relevant authorities. He eschewed gratuitous commentary. Instead, he chose to reason cases utilizing traditional methodology of legal reasoning. He preferred the concrete over the esoteric. He tested propositions with examples. His judgments were mercifully free of long footnotes. These judgments will stand as his legacy and a master class to all judges on legal reasoning and judgment writing. On an interpersonal level, Justice Bereaux was a delight to be around. Well, most of the time. To be around him, you had to be able to take talk. He loved ribbing his colleagues. We all have had to learn that one must not take bait. He would mischievously sometimes say outrageous things just to see if it would get a rise out of us. But he meant no harm. It was all part of his repertoire of humor, plain talk, and intellectual honesty. I go back to his three advantages in his early life. When not working over his judgments, he was at his best around a table with friends or family nearby and telling the stories of his growing up, his days in practice, and court. Many of the stories involved things that had happened to him. He enjoyed interrogating and at times bantering with counsel in court. He particularly relished questioning his colleagues at pre-meetings. But he saved his gentlest side for when he visited the Hugh Wooding Law School to judge the appellate moot competitions. There, you would see the Nolan Bereaux who cares greatly for the future of the profession. We will all miss Justice Bereaux's discussions on the law, society, and people. He will be remembered as someone who cared deeply for the judiciary. He spoke his mind whenever he felt we were going off track, and he did his best in his way to keep us on a stable and even keel. He was steadfast in his defense of judicial independence, even from perceived attempts at administrative control, both within and without. He helped navigate the judiciary through troubled times with his principled position. We wait eagerly to see how next he will choose to continue to contribute to national service. We wish him well on his retirement, with blessings of good health, peace, and happiness in the years ahead. We wish him Godspeed and grace. I will now invite the registrar to make her presentation.
My Lord Chief Justice, my lords, today we pay tribute to Justice of Appeal, the Honourable Mr. Justice Nolan Bereaux, in recognition of a career shaped by discipline, sound judgment, and a deep respect for the rule of law. Mr. Justice of Appeal Bereaux earned his LLB from Cave Hill, Barbados in 1978. He then completed his legal education certificate at the Hugh Wooding Law School and was admitted to the bar in 1981. In 1994, he obtained a Master of Laws in International and Comparative Law from the Georgetown Law Center in Washington, D.C. That academic grounding shows in the clarity and structure of his reasoning and judgment writing. As mentioned by your lordship, before joining the bench, he spent his entire legal career in public service, rising to the position of Deputy Solicitor General. In that role, he handled matters of national importance with care and precision. His work ethic and legal acumen stood out early, and many would say this period marked the development of one of the most brilliant legal minds in our jurisdiction. Justice Bereaux first acted as a judge of the High Court in September 1997 and was confirmed as a puisne judge 6 months later. Over time, he built a reputation for fairness, preparation, and consistency. On April 20th, 2009, he was appointed to the Court of Appeal, where he continued to serve with distinction. On the bench, Justice Bereaux takes a careful and structured approach. He listens closely, intervening only when necessary to seek clarification. He does not readily engage in exchanges or debates with counsel, preferring instead to maintain a firm, measured, and restrained approach to proceedings. When delivering judgment, he analyzes each issue step by step and explains his reasoning in a way that leaves little room for doubt. He is meticulous. Every argument must stand up to scrutiny. Every detail matters. It is no surprise, therefore, that the Privy Council has described his judgments as clear and well-reasoned. That meticulous nature and firmness are not confined to the courtroom. They are just as evident in his interactions with colleagues and staff. There may, at times, be a perception that he is an intimidating and formidable figure. But his exacting standards promote disciplined, efficient work and help to ensure that the administration of justice is carried out to the highest level. Those who know him well will recognize his dry, sometimes sharp sense of humor. It can catch you off guard, but it often lightens the moment and reminds us that even in the seriousness of the courtroom and the work we do, there is room for wit. His contribution to the law is both wide-ranging and lasting. In Jason Jones against the Attorney General, he addressed the constitutionality of provisions of the Sexual Offences Act. That matter is now pending before the Privy Council, but whatever the outcome, one cannot deny the skill in the reasoning and the quality of the drafting in that judgment. while acknowledging the tension between evolving social values and constitutional limits, he grounded his decision firmly within the framework of the Constitution. In Equal Opportunity Commission and Rishi Prasad Maharaj against Cascadia Hotel, he delivered a landmark decision. This appeal arose from the first sexual harassment claim seeking redress before the Equal Opportunity Tribunal. The tribunal had dismissed the claims for want of jurisdiction. Justice Bereaux reversed that decision. He held that sexual harassment falls within the concept of discrimination in employment under the Equal Opportunity Act, confirming that the tribunal has the jurisdiction to hear such claims. That ruling has had a lasting impact on the development of equality law in Trinidad and Tobago. Justice Bereaux takes the time to go into the detail of matters, working through finer points with a view to providing clear judicial guidance. In Adana Paul against Wells Services Petroleum Company Limited, he addressed the assessment of damages, giving a judgment which is now regarded as a leading modern authority on the multiplier and multiplicand approach to future loss and loss of earning capacity, as well as the treatment of interest. Trial judges and masters continue to rely on the principles set out in that case. Justice Bereaux has also addressed complex areas of administrative law, consistently maintaining a clear distinction between the judicial function and legislative responsibility. In the matters involving the establishment of the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority, he made it clear that courts must not step into questions of policy unless the law requires it. He kept the focus on legality. When you look at his career, a clear picture emerges. He approaches each case with care. He respects the law. He understands the role of the judge and stays within it. That is his legacy, one of integrity, consistency, and a steady hand. Justice Bereaux, we thank you for your many years of service and your contribution to the administration of justice in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you. I will now invite Madam Justice of Appeal, Dina Mora.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Justice. My Lord Chief Justice, Judges of Appeal, Senior Counsel, Head of the Bar, dear colleagues and friends. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, in his poem, The Ladder of St. Augustine, wrote, "The heights that great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upwards through the night." It was this verse that Justice Bereaux had in mind in the mid-80s when, as State Counsel in the Solicitor General's Department, he frequently alluded to the need to burn the midnight oil in preparation for his cases. Indeed, my lords, Justice Bereaux's career was like that flame which rises from the midnight oil, a flame sparked by genius, kept burning by perseverance, hard work, a flame that was fueled by a deep faith, and one perpetually dancing by an irresistible sense of humor. My lords, I will begin with his sense of humor. Justice Bereaux saw the humorous side of everything, and even when one was the victim of his brutal humor, it was irresistible in the sense that it was impossible not to respond with peals of laughter. I'll give you an example. When I returned to the Solicitor General's Department many years ago, having lost a matter and looking very downcast, Justice Bereaux looked at me and said, "How your nose looking long like a melon so?" Well, my ill mood lifted and I dissolved in laughter. His humor extended to the names that he would give to his judicial siblings, so that in any one day the same judge would be Akeisha, Afisha, Dorothy, Pulbasi. And spouses were invariably Howie name. Justice Bereaux was impelled by a deep homegrown faith, and I will tell you of the fruit of this faith. He actively supported his parishes at St. Francis Church in Erin and St. Mary's Church in St. James. It was there that he learned to sing and performed at the concerts of Lawyers Under Lights, with his resonant baritone voice, and also with his guilty look that said, I should really be back to work. Justice Bereaux loved children and young people, and over the years, he was frequently requested by the Hugh Wooding Law School to preside at moots. When we sat together, he would remind me to be gentle with the students and to avoid discouraging them. He would lighten their mood with his characteristic yes and a lopsided smile. On one occasion, two young male students were admiring Justice Bereaux's newly acquired X5 BMW. But instead of shooing them away, he invited them to take a look at his vehicle, the interior and the exterior. And then he said to them, at your age you admire, and at my age you acquire. He was and continues to be a great brother and friend, always concerned for the many times when I was overturned by the Privy Council, and always a provider of good practical advice. It was about 10 years ago when engaged in a bitterly fought public law matter, I was weighed down with raging commentaries on social media. I called Justice Bereaux at 10 p.m. and asked him if I should recuse myself. He said, Myra, not my real name, by the way. Welcome to the judiciary. If you recuse, you will only draw more attention to yourself. Just be quiet, work hard, finish the judgment, and everything will fall into place. Thank you, bro, for that advice. I have followed it ever since. But I've saved the best for last. We've heard much about Justice Bereaux's judgments. Justice Bereaux displayed that spark of genius since his days as an advocate in the SG's department. I have to add here that he was not easy to work with, okay? His submissions to the court were not only well-researched, filled with authorities and sound arguments, but he displayed passion in addressing the court. My lord, this is not right. This is not right. You must dismiss the case against the claimant, because of what he thought was right and his genuine belief in his arguments. Because of his outstanding work, he received the rare perquisite of full-pay study leave and proceeded to study for the LLM in International and Comparative Law at the Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Again, burning the midnight oil upon his return, he was appointed to the post of Deputy Solicitor General and represented the state on many occasions at the Privy Council. On one such occasion, he returned with a magnificent red bag conferred by the great Sir Godfrey Lacane, who argued constitutional matters before their lordships on behalf of the state. And just as an aside, with no pretensions at humility, Justice Bereaux placed the red bag on a coat hanger outside of his door for all to see and admire, or envy, as the case may be. It's true. In 1997, Justice Bereaux made that rare leap from Deputy Solicitor General to the High Court bench. It was on this occasion that his colleagues at the Solicitor General's Department turned out in our numbers to welcome to the bench the new Lord Bereaux of Erin. Justice Bereaux's landmark cases have been numerous. In the year 2002, a mere 4 years after his appointment, Justice Bereaux heard an application for an extension of time to apply for leave for judicial review in FFOS against EMA. He went the extra mile in that case to consider the merits of the application for judicial review. Their lordships endorsed his work in their 2005 decision. Again, in the case of Mangal Singh against Juman, he received the applause of their lordships when he described the claimant as an abject liar. In the Court of Appeal, Justice Bereaux's cases have become cited as the go-to authority on many subjects. In the case of Nino Garcia, for example, Nino Garcia against the Attorney General, he recognized the principle of appellate deference, but exhorted a court of appeal cannot shirk its responsibility to reverse wrongful findings of fact. Another one of his frequently cited decisions is the case of Jacqueline Hilton Clark against the RBC, which stands as authority in deciding whether or not there is a matter of public importance when there's an application for conditional leave. Justice Bereaux has been upheld by their lordships on many occasions. Notably, there's the case of Chief Fire Officer against Felix Phillips and others, where their lordships indicated their agreement with Justice Bereaux's reasoning. And again, there was the case of Ravi Balgobin Maharaj against the Minister of Finance, where their lordships agreed with Justice Bereaux and quoted him, where he had said, and they quoted, to accept this submission will lead to manifest absurdity. More significantly, their lordships have preferred his dissenting judgments in many cases. Among them was the case of Teresa Doré against the Attorney General. When I was in the majority, their lordships preferred the minority reasoning of Justice Bereaux. Justice Bereaux's judgments always reflected a judicial balance, recognizing the popular view, and then breaking it down to what he perceived to be correct. Notably, there's the case of Rehanna Lorick and another against the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, which challenged the ministerial decision for the lockdown of the borders during COVID. Justice Bereaux recognized the plight of the executive, and he said, in allowing the appeal, he said, "In coming to my conclusions in this appeal, I'm deeply mindful that the minister and his team were faced with a very difficult situation, the management of a pandemic in which the health and indeed the security of the entire population was at serious risk. They were required to make hard decisions which negatively affected many people. I'm also mindful that 5 years later, having survived largely unscathed through the skillful efforts of the executive, it is now easy with hindsight to apportion blame. That is certainly not my intention here. Rather, it is to uphold the Constitution." When I read this, I called up Justice Bereaux, and I said, "Bro, teach me to write like you." He said, "Mears, just be yourself." So I took his advice, and I was myself, and their lordship still ruled against me. So, my dear brother and friend, I say thank you to you on my own behalf. I also say thank you to you on behalf of this nation and on behalf of the entire Caribbean region, which you have served so faithfully. Your legacy will continue for many generations to speak with erudition and eloquence. Indeed, your legacy will continue like that very flame that rises from the midnight oil, illuminating the jurisprudence of this region for many, many years to come. Thank you, my Lord.
I will now invite Mr. Sean Julian, the Solicitor General.
Honorable Chief Justice, Honorable Justices, distinguished members of the bar, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great honor that I address the Honorable Court today on this momentous occasion. Special sitting of the court convened in honor of the exemplary career and significant contribution of Justice of Appeal, Nolan Bereaux. My first interaction with the learned judge came in 1993, when I was assigned to the Office of the Attorney General to complete my in-service training program. I was paired with my good friend, Mr. Ted Rupnerine, to work with then Mr. Bereaux and other attorneys of the Solicitor General's office. While I do not have too many memories of that early encounter, the one thing that stood out for me was that he seemed to have a penchant for pronouncing our names in his own unique style. Ted became Mr. Rupnerine, and I became Senior Julian. I was heartened to discover when I finally got into practice that this was not unique to us, as it seemed that everyone that appeared before him expected to have their names manipulated in some way or the other. But I firmly believe that those early years in the Solicitor General's office played a large role in our judge's evolution to becoming a jurisprudential giant, especially in the area of public law. He has been described as a first principle constitutional judge, not afraid to develop the law based on the core values of the Constitution. A good example of this was, as cited by Milady, the recent decision in the Rahana Lorick and Joanne Pantin matter against the state. As indicated, the matter stemmed from the closure of Trinidad and Tobago's borders pursuant to the coronavirus pandemic in 2020. The two appellants had exited the country just before the lockdown was implemented and found themselves stranded in the United States under challenging conditions. The case raised two important questions. First, did the minister have a duty to inform the public about the criteria used for granting exemptions into Trinidad and Tobago? Second, if such a duty existed, did a failure to fulfill it violate the appellant's rights under sections 4A, B, and G of the Constitution? The situation was unprecedented as the pandemic was unlike anything in the nation's history. It was essential to strike a balance between the government's legitimate authority to restrict the entry of nationals during a public health crisis and the potential violations of citizens' constitutional rights. In response to the first question, the learned judge determined that since individuals were being permitted entry on a case-by-case exemption basis, the minister indeed had a duty to clarify the criteria for obtaining these exemptions. Without transparency regarding these criteria, there was a significant risk of arbitrariness in whom might successfully obtain an exemption over others. Moreover, the judge concurred with the appellants on the second issue as well, concluding that the lack of clarity about the criteria constituted a breach of their constitutional rights, specifically sections 4A and B. His lordship viewed the right to enter and exit Trinidad and Tobago as an inherent aspect of the right to liberty. Additionally, he ruled that the right to the protection of the law, a finite expression of the due process provision in section 4A, was also violated. Any limitations imposed on these fundamental rights needed to be clearly defined and communicated to the public by the executive. The Honourable Judge then concluded with the following sobering and memorable words. The constitutional rights conferred by sections 4 and 5, and in particular the right to liberty, are hard-won rights. The trials inflicted upon our ancestors by slavery and the slave trade, with the mass deprivation of liberty and lives, are matters of record. So too, the trials of indentureship. We must never surrender or compromise our hard-won rights and freedoms for which our ancestors paid so dearly. Such compromise usually begins with the most innocuous of executive actions. No matter how compelling the emergency, the executive must always be held accountable for infringements of the rights and freedoms of our citizens." End quote. This sense of justice mingled with morality, I dare say, was a hallmark of the work of our judge. He had a deep-seated belief in the sanctity of the law, coupled with the protection of the vulnerable. In the matter of George Daniel and the AG, for example, the Honourable Judge was appalled to learn that in 2005, there was as yet no ramp or elevator access to the Hall of Justice for persons with disabilities who were confined to wheelchairs. In a landmark decision, His Lordship declared that the lack of access was quite unacceptable and constituted a 4A liberty breach of the Constitution. As he observed, the physically impaired must themselves have easy and direct access to the Hall of Justice to personally pursue the upholding of their rights and to witness proceedings if they so choose. Liberty requires that they have that option. A lack of unimpeded access can act as a disincentive to the legitimate pursuit of one's legal rights. The judge went on to direct that the state take the necessary steps to provide within 18 months direct access to the public entrance of the Hall of Justice to the claimant and other members of the physically challenged who were wheelchair-bound. Finally, in the brief time available, one cannot discuss the life and legacy of our judge without at least mentioning the wit and humor that characterized his personality, both in and out of the courtroom. I recall on one occasion attending Holy Mass at Sacred Heart RC Church around the corner on a lunchtime, and the judge was at Mass. However, I observed that his foot was in a cast and that he had to put it up on the bench in front of him. So as I processed up the line to receive Holy Communion, I leant over and asked the judge whether he would like me to have the Eucharistic minister bring Holy Communion for him. He said that he would be grateful. So I asked the minister, and he brought the communion for the Honourable Judge. When Mass was completed, I noticed the judge looking frantically around the church. Then he saw me and beckoned me to come. I came over and he asked me to assist him to his vehicle where his driver was waiting for him. I carefully assisted the judge over to his vehicle, opened the back door of his Land Rover, and helped him into the back seat. As soon as he was comfortably ensconced in the back seat of his vehicle, he turned to me and said, "If you think this will ease you up in court, you have a different thought coming." I reassured him that I had no such intention. He was always such a gentle creature. So today, as we gather to honor Justice Bereaux, let us always remember his unwavering dedication to the values of fairness and equity that must always guide us within our profession. It is essential that we carry forth the principles that he espoused and embrace the fundamental belief that the law must serve all members of society justly and equitably. In closing, on behalf of the Office of the Solicitor General, in which you served for so many years, and indeed all present here today, I extend our deepest gratitude and well wishes to you, Judge. Your legacy will undoubtedly endure in the annals of Trinidad and Tobago's legal history, and your contributions will continue to influence our legal landscape for years to come. We bid you a lovely retirement. We will miss your persona, your charm, your erudition, and I've been hearing a rumor that you might be migrating to the Sister Isle, perhaps to plant peas or other vegetables. Please know that when next time in the Sister Isle, I'll be visiting you for a pot of pigeon peas. Thank you.
Thank you. I invite the President of the Law Association, Mrs. Lynette C. Bransweet, Senior Counsel.
My Lord Chief Justice, Honourable Justices of Appeal, other members of the judiciary, learned colleagues at the bar, ladies and gentlemen. It is both a privilege and a solemn honor to stand on behalf of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago to pay tribute to you, sir, the Honourable Mr. Justice of Appeal Nolan Bereaux, on the occasion of your retirement from the Court of Appeal bench. Today, we do not merely mark the end of judicial office. We mark the close of a chapter of sustained and distinguished service to the law and to the administration of justice and to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Justice Bereaux's career has been one defined by quiet industry and steady excellence. From his years at the bar to his tenure on the bench and ultimately in the Court of Appeal, he has contributed meaningfully to the development of our jurisprudence, particularly in the area of public law, of which he has an excellent grasp. His judgments reflect a careful and disciplined mind, one attentive not only to legal principle, but to the practical consequences of the court's decisions for litigants and for the wider society. From the perspective of the bar, we have had the benefit, indeed the privilege, of appearing before him. We came to know him as a judge who meticulously prepared, deeply engaged with the arguments before him, unfailing was courteous to counsel, and unwavering in his insistence on clarity, structure, and precision. Counsel quickly understood that appearances before Justice Bereaux required not only advocacy, but disciplined advocacy. And that, in truth, is one of the enduring contributions of a good judge, not only to decide cases, but to elevate the standard of those who appear before the court. His work at the appellate level has also carried a broader institutional importance. In the Court of Appeal, where the development of principle is paramount, Justice Bereaux has consistently provided leadership and demonstrated a fidelity to the rule of law, a respect for precedent, and where necessary, the courage to engage critically with it. His contributions have formed part of the body of jurisprudence that guides not only this jurisdiction, but resonates across the wider Caribbean. But beyond the written word and beyond the reported judgment, there is the matter of judicial temperament. Justice Bereaux has exemplified qualities that define a strong and trusted judiciary, measured, balanced, firm in his conclusions, and always conscious of the weight of judicial responsibility. But above all, a keen sense of justice, which made it a delight to appear before him. A keen sense of humor, which made it a delight to appear before him. In a time when the demands on our courts continue to grow, these qualities are not merely admirable, they are essential. He believed that judges should stay in their lanes and that the role of the judge was to interpret the law, not to make it. He lived by the doctrine of stare decisis. If a law was deficient or unjust, it was for Parliament and not the judge to fix it. Some of his more important decisions came in Francis versus Hines, the Jason Jones matter, the Danraj Singh matter, the Minister of Planning and Development versus the JCC, R.V. Hines, Maraj versus the AG, the Dumas case, Francis versus Hines, the AG versus Hadid, the ETEC matter, the AS-CISA matter, AG versus Maraj, CJ versus the Law Association, and of course the matter which was previously alluded to, Justice Bereaux, your decision in the Cascadia case, the sexual harassment judgment. For many attorneys, particularly younger members of the bar, his courtroom was a place of instruction, both by lecture and by example. Standards were set, standards were maintained, and in that process, the profession itself was strengthened. On behalf of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago, I express our sincere appreciation for Justice Bereaux's 27 years of service on the bench and years of service prior to that in the Solicitor General's Department. His contribution has been significant, his influence enduring, and his legacy firmly embedded in the fabric of our legal system. Justice Bereaux was keenly aware of the historical and socioeconomic and cultural circumstances of the society for which he adjudicated. He was keenly interested in the legal profession and in the attorneys who appeared before him, and took the time to participate in the activities of the Law Association. Sir, we thank you for your service. We thank you for your integrity. We thank you for the example that you have set for both the bench and the bar, and we wish you continued good health, fulfillment, and purpose in the years ahead. We trust that retirement will afford you the opportunity to reflect with justifiable pride on a career well spent in the service of justice. May your retirement be as distinguished as your career. We thank you.
Thank you. May I invite Mr. Russell Martineau, Senior Counsel, to address us.
My lords, it is indeed a pleasure and a distinct honor to be here this morning on this occasion, and I thank you. Let me begin by saying that I first knew Justice Bereaux about 1982. He was then a member of the chambers of the Solicitor General, and I was Attorney General. The Solicitor General's chambers was responsible for the conduct of civil proceedings on behalf of the state. The Solicitor General was then Mrs. Jean Permanent, who later became Madam Justice Permanent of the High Court and later of the Court of Appeal. The Deputy Solicitor General was Mr. Lionel Jones, who later became Mr. Justice Jones of the High Court and of the Court of Appeal. Perhaps it was inevitable that Mr. Justice Bereaux too, having had early training from such legal giants, would become a judge and a justice of appeal. The members of the Solicitor General's chambers were then orphans housed in the Red House. The main occupant was Parliament, the Lands and Surveys Department, as well as some offices for which the Attorney General then had responsibility, shared space in the Red House. Building space was occupied in the area occupied by the Solicitor General's chambers, but it was very cramped. Air condition was a luxury. Yet, at that time, in the mid-1980s, there was a cadre of bright young lawyers, eager to work and dedicated to serve, who formed a team of lawyers full of promise that later illuminated the landscape of the legal and judicial platform. Among them were Madam Justice Rajnath Lee, now a judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Ms. Sharon Christopher, a former deputy chief of the First Citizens Bank group of companies, and then we had Mrs. Deborah Peake, who I expect would be here this morning, a senior counsel, Ms. Jacqueline Kwamina became secretary for years of Republic Bank Group of Companies, and I think Madam Justice G. Marmor joined us late in the day. In those days, the demands of the chambers of the Solicitor General were many, and the members were few. The Attorney General would almost on a daily basis discuss with the Solicitor General the various advices requested of the members of the chambers of the Solicitor General and the cases on the upcoming court schedule, with a view to offering what little assistance he could at that time. That led to the formal contact with State Counsel Bereaux. He was impressive. Unsurprisingly, when in Morgan and the Attorney General, High Court Action 433 of 1982, a High Court judge held that the Rent Restriction Dwelling Houses Act of 1981 was unconstitutional. The Attorney General, having felt compelled to argue the appeal, chose to do so together with State Counsel Bereaux. It was an honor to be with him in that case, and I thank him for the privilege of appearing with him in the only case which I, as Attorney General, argued. We were successful, and the Privy Council upheld the decision of the then Court of Appeal. That was a time of promise and a time of challenge. The young team of state attorneys needed better office space. The government responded by acquiring what was euphemistically called, and I put the words in the order which they were, a bar and restaurant, and made it available to the members of the bar of the Solicitor General's chambers after some renovation, of course. No doubt, government being influenced by the euphemistic description of the building. Such was the new accommodation that the lawyers approached their engagements with exceptional vigor and dedication. By Friday afternoon of each week, having survived a week of court pressure, and in those days it was real pressure, they relaxed and religiously pursued trivial pursuit, some sort of game which I'm sure sharpened their legal and advocacy skills. I used to be in the chambers of the Attorney General looking through the window to see when they would leave, but I gave up. Whatever they, including State Counsel, did as lawyers at that time did not go unnoticed. The team then won the admiration of senior officers of the state and state institutions. I remember then Governor Bob telling from the central bank, telling me, Dan Boy, which is my pet name, I'm sorry, but I have to steal your people. They're really good. And coming from Dr. Bob, you couldn't get it from a better source. And he did, in fact, recruit a number of people from the Attorney General's chambers and took them into the central bank. But more than that, those lawyers also attracted the favorable attention of senior counsel, senior members of the legal profession, with whom they worked or by whom they were observed. I remember Tajmul Hussain, Queen's Counsel, probably the doyen of the bar at that time, Michael de Labastide, Chief Justice and President of the Caribbean Court of Justice later, and Ewart Thorne, all praising the quality of work and dedication of members of the team. State Councillor Bereaux was a popular name among them. Later, when Chief Justice de la Bastille assumed that office, he invited State Councillor Bereaux, who was then Deputy Solicitor General, to be a member of his bench. I was then back in private practice. Then Deputy Solicitor General Bereaux mentioned to me that he was invited, and in his typical unassuming style, indicated his reluctance to accept the offer of the then Chief Justice. I believe that he must have mentioned that offer also with one of his, or to one of his admirers, Madam Justice Monica Barnes, who informed me that she had to persuade him to accept the offer. Such was his modesty and his humility. No doubt persuaded by Madam Justice Barnes rather than by me, the offer was accepted, and that was the beginning of a stellar career as a judge. Those of us who remember Madam Justice Barnes remember her as a very proper lady. If you were admired and respected as Justice Bereaux was, you would be invited to her home for a meal with the finest silverware, crockery, and crystals. Justice Bereaux frequently was such an invitee, particularly around Christmas time, I was told. Later, sometimes, Justice Henderson got a pick. I was too on one occasion in my early days as Attorney General, but later, my invitation was for Morby, ginger beer, sorrel, and black cake. That was at Christmas time. I believe that unlike Justice Bereaux, I did not handle the silverware, crockery, and crystals well. And so we come to Justice Bereaux. My lords, my ladies, a golden thread woven into the judicial tapestry is his respect for humanity, the dignity of the human person. This is reflected in one of his landmark judgments, the Daniel case referred to by the learned Solicitor General today. To those who have read it before, I respectfully submit that they should do so again. To those who have not read it, I respectfully submit that they should do so now. Paragraphs 25 to 29 of Justice Bereaux's judgments in that case are powerful. They are the final paragraphs which are in a real sense reflected in an architectural articulation in the physical modification of the building in which we at this moment occupy. The telling words of this final paragraph are, I shall grant the applicant a declaration that the non-provision by the state of direct public wheelchair access through the public entrance to the Hall of Justice, Knox Street, Port of Spain, is a breach of the applicant's right to liberty under Section 4A of the Constitution. Pursuant to Section 14, I shall direct that the state take such immediate steps as are necessary to provide within 18 months direct access through the public entrance of the Hall of Justice, Knox Street, Port of Spain, to the applicant and other members of the physically challenged who are wheelchair bound. That was not merely legal victory for the disabled, or indeed Mr. Daniel, and the less fortunate in our society. Not just about physical access to our courts by disabled persons, but it was an enlightening chapter in our constitutional jurisprudence, directing the state to take immediate positive measures to ensure that fundamental rights are effectively respected and enjoyed by individuals. Not insignificantly, one of his closest friends in the Solicitor General's department before his passing was Mr. Terence Thorne, who was blind but a wonderful advocate. Recently, Sunday last, in one of our Sunday newspapers, Dr. Terence Farrell, in an article with headline, Bereaux off the Bench, Part 1, I did not see Part 2, commented on a number of the leading judgments of Justice Bereaux, as indeed many of those who spoke today before me have. I thank Dr. Farrell for he has expressed in the article glowing sentiments for our Justice Bereaux, sentiments which I would have wanted to express if I were allotted more time and if I had the eloquence of Dr. Farrell. But again, plagiarism is not one of my virtues. I must briefly, however, express some further summary thoughts as a member of the bar. Justice Bereaux is well known for his careful and thorough judgments, starting from his days as a puisne judge. Characterization of his judgments in that way has been stated by their lordships, and again, that has been mentioned by those who spoke before me, one of which you will find in the Fishermen and Friends case, referred to, I think, by the learned Solicitor General in the Environmental Commission. Justice Bereaux's moral compass, as I saw it, was justice. Let it be done, and let it be done according to law. Our jurisprudence is filled with judgments where he perceived that a party was unjustly treated. And in those, he expressed his strong views of such injustice in the strongest possible terms. Injustice is the enemy of Justice Bereaux, and he lets that clearly be known. The cases are too well known and do not need reference or repetition. He is also a judge who, with a certain measure of success, injects humor in his court proceedings. We heard again today from Madam Justice Dinama and from some of those who spoke before me about his sense of humor, a very wry one, and if I may say so. I was sometimes at the end of it, and I didn't know whether it was humor or otherwise. From the bar, I have followed the career of Justice Bereaux with admiration. His scholarship is well known. His judicial balance is well respected. Though he came from the bowels of government service, none can truly say that there was any government bias in his judgments. His integrity is impeccable. I have known none to question it. My lords and my ladies, I wish to end by saying that if Justice Bereaux ever erred in his judgments, it was because he is human. It is human to err, and also because other judges, by a majority, or because of their higher standard, have said that he erred, but they too are human. I thank him for his long and dedicated service to our noble profession, the bar, and for being an exemplar to all attorneys. I couldn't resist the mention made by the learned Solicitor General of whatever he heard about planting peas in the Sister Isle. But just in case that is true, I say, welcome home, Judge. My lords, I thank you.
May I now invite Mr. Justice of Appeal, Nolan Bereaux, to reply.
Thank you, Honourable Chief Justice, brother judges of the Court of Appeal, and sisters, forgive me, senior members of the bar, junior members of the bar, friends, and more importantly, forgive me for saying so, family members for being here. It's an honor to be able to sit and see my family members in court for a change. I used to try to keep them far away from the profession. I couldn't do it today. I have to start with thank yous. I must start with thanking God for accompanying me on this 28-year journey as a judge. I could not have done it without His presence and inspiration, His graces and His mercies. As you would have heard from Mr. Martino, I was initially reluctant to take the judge work. I was happy at the Solicitor General. It was a wonderful place. And I had two sets of professionals. The first set, all of them got stolen, as Mr. Martino said. And the second set, what I refer to as the second coming, which was another brilliant bunch of young attorneys. So I was quite happy, and I also wanted to be the only judge I ever coveted. I wanted to be Solicitor General. I wanted to go before the Privy Council and argue cases. In those days, whenever the state did an appeal, it was silk, English silk. And I felt that I could have done as good a job. That never happened. So I was happy where I was, and I needed God's guidance and God's grace. Yes, Ms. Barnes persuaded me, but so did Mr. Martino. And so a lot of my judicial journey was accompanied by prayer, Mass, Blessed Sacrament, adoration. And I suppose that gave me, I know it gave me the inspiration to write the judgments that you also compliment so much. So the mercy also includes permitting me to get to the biblical 10. There was a time when getting even to 65 was a little iffy, as my family members would know. I had to undergo medical treatment for major illness. That destroyed the myth of my indestructibility and made me realize that my life was a gift from God to be cherished and to be thankful for. It was a difficult time. I made it through with the help and support and prayers of my siblings and friends. I want to publicly thank Sister Margarita Chan, who is here today, for her many prayers, novenas, and her counsel and entreaties to trust God. That is easier said than done, especially when you're frightened. I thank you, sister. God heard and answered our prayers. I must also publicly thank Father George Lewis, who has been my spiritual advisor, counselor, and confessor for all of these 28 years. I also sought his advice on whether I should take the job, and he also persuaded me. Your guidance and support were invaluable. I must also thank my parents, Carlton and Beryl Bereaux, for sacrificing to send me to school. They did without so that I could have. They gave me education. They instilled in me moral and spiritual values that I have used as a judge. They taught me discipline, and they showed me love. I must thank my siblings, all of them. Not all of them are here, but all of them. Francis, Daphne, Rose, Marion, Joseph, Andrew, Fiona, Aline. I've lost 3 of them, 3 sisters along the way. I've lost a good friend, Terry Thorne, my buddy, also part of the support and journey. I have to thank my nieces and nephews, my great nieces and nephews now. I'm happy to see at least my nephews and nieces here. Your love and support helped me throughout my legal and judicial career. My friends, I'll single out my friend, Mr. Justice of Appeal Henderson, Ms. Sharon Christopher, Laurelie Braffett, Elaine Green, and Gilbert, my rum chums, as we call ourselves. I have to thank Chief Justice Michael de Lavestide for having faith in me and in appointing me a judge. I must confess that I was astounded when he asked me to join the bench. I have to thank my support staff, Mrs. Keita Singh, my efficient and trustworthy secretary for the last 13 years, who soon realized when she started working with me that she had to adjust her methods because order and organization was not part of my DNA. My orderly, Lisa de Lavestide, who I could trust with my bank card, my credit card, and my PIN. Before them, I had Iola Pierre Farrell and Susanna Jeffers, who served faithfully and efficiently as well. They were the backbone of my High Court service. I can't, and then of course, come to my Judicial Research Counsel, Mr. Vaughan Thomas, my brilliant Judicial Research Counsel, who was never afraid to challenge my draft opinions and whose opinions and clinical analyses I grew to respect and admire. He's another judge in the making, and hopefully, and most likely a brilliant one too. Certainly over the last 2 years, when another medical issue arose, his research opinions and drafts provided important foundations for my judgments. I have to thank my GSOs, Shalini and Miranda in particular, who provided that not technical support, the administrative support that we may be able to function properly. I have to thank members of the now defunct West panel, Mark, Peter, Maria, Ronnie, and later on, Ronnie now Chief Justice, and later on Geoff and Ricky. From onwards of 2022, we had a sustained and successful assault on the appeal backlog during a project aptly called March Madness. By the time the panel system was disbanded in 2025, we had started hearing 2025 appeals. There was, of course, a downside to that in that reserved judgments and the time for it went up because you were taking on too much. There's the IT department who had to deal with me, an unashamed dinosaur, when it came to computers, and who would turn up to solve what turned out to be very simple issues with my computer. And there was Anne, Diane, Deanna, and Carlene, my tea ladies. And there was a gentleman called Brain and his technical team, who always ready to fix a light bulb, a toilet, or faucet to make my life a lot more comfortable in the Court of Appeal. And there was, of course, my MTS girls, as I call them, the two Sherrys, who always greeted me with a cherry good morning and kept my chamber spick and span. When I got admitted to the bar in 1981, my only wish was to be regarded as a sound lawyer, respected by my peers. Being a judge was not on my radar. I am thankful that I was regarded as sound enough a lawyer to join the judicial service. Getting to the Court of Appeal was a bonus. My entire public service career spanned 45 years, 16 and a half years at the bar, 11 and a half years in the Court of Appeal, and 17 years in the 11 and a half years in the High Court, and 17 and a half years in the Court of Appeal. That is a long time. By far the most difficult were the 11 and a half years at the bar. They were also the most enjoyable. There was camaraderie both within my chambers and at the bar. I practiced entirely at the Solicitor General's chambers with a wonderful and brilliant bunch of lawyers. Sharon Christopher, Maureen Rajnorfley, Terry Thorne, Jackie Kwamino, Miriam Samaru, Pat Sovian, Miradine Amaro, John Carrington, Lynette Ramuta, Bernard Shepard, Ian Benjamin, Stuart Best. We learned from each other. We enjoyed each other's company. And yes, we played Trivial Pursuit every Friday evening. It was fun. Sometimes even that got a little heated. We were led by Lionel Jones, the Solicitor General, who led by example. And we had an Attorney General, one Russell Martino, a gentleman with a big booming voice, who loved to bark orders at you. In 1982, that was the time in 82 when we started, when judicial review was in its infancy. Constitutional law had developed. We had quite a few significant cases by then, but Order 53 applications were brand new. And when you were dealing with Order 53 applications, you were coming up against 9 out of 10 times Ramesh Lawrence Maraj. It was quite a battle. The appearances, some of the matters were high profile. I can think of one in particular, Jamaat al-Muslimin, where it was a battle royal between Mr. Yod Thorne, who was briefed for us, and Ramesh. We also had a case, the judicial review applications went a long way to developing the law and to providing precedent for what we now have. Yes, I cut my teeth in public law. I love it. I know it. And a lot of it came from doing those judicial review applications against Ramesh and later against people like Douglas Mendez and even my friend Gregory Delson. We were ably led by Justice Jones and, of course, guided by Mr. Martino. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of stress. It's a lot of anguish. And, of course, yes, you could get a little grouchy from time to time. I certainly did. But there was another side, another battle, the death penalty cases. And we came up against a group of lawyers I will call the Bleeding Heart Brigade. Those cases were also high profile because there was always the press. And those cases involved a lot of emotion. The BHB, as I will call them for these purposes, was led by Frank Solomon. And those of us who remember Frank Solomon, on a good day, you couldn't get a better orator. And he was very emotional and very strong and very powerful in his speeches. It was very impressive. It was always great to sit and listen to him. But also included in that bunch was Reggie Amo, Michael Castani, may he rest in peace, Gregory Delzin, Douglas Mendez, Alice York Suhan, believe it or not, and later on, I think, Sophia Choate. Our encounters in court were full of drama and got a little heated. The BHB would spring into action whenever the government of the day decided it needed to bring down the crime rate by hanging somebody. They would read a death warrant to some condemned prisoner. In short order, the BHB would get a stay of execution. We always suspected they had some sort of connection in the judiciary. They had some judges or sympathizers in the judiciary. Now for now, stay of execution. We would then be sent by Mr. Martineau to go and have that stay of execution removed. And it would be a battle royal between Frank and Lyle Jones with the supporters on either side, the young attorneys on either side. In those days, I was a rabid member of the death penalty team. I believed in the death penalty. As far as I'm concerned, if you did the crime, they should hang you high, high, high. That was my view. We believe that the BHB were abusing the Constitution by filing baseless constitutional claims and getting stays of execution on the flimsiest of grounds. I see them laughing. They know who they are. On the other hand, the BHB felt that they were saving a life, that the condemned prisoners themselves were victims of the social order in Trinidad and Tobago. In many respects, I came to believe that they were right. I did not remain a fan of the death penalty, and it was indeed because of the very same death penalty cases. After years of filing affidavits based on the instructions of the prison officers, I decided maybe it's time to go and see for myself. So I went to visit, and I visited the gallows. I think Stuart Best accompanied me. And what I saw horrified me, appalled me, made me distraught. It was awful. There was, as we entered the gallows, the government had read that warrants to 3 people, and it was 3 of the worst cases. There was no way those people were going to hang when we read the facts. But the then Attorney General of it was not Mr. Martineau, decided that we were misinterpreting Pratt and Morgan. And he decided that these 3 could hang. So when we entered the gallows, there were these 3 nooses. Each had a name of one of the condemned prisoners. And they were hanging from a pulley with some hooks that looked like a hat rack. I could not, and each had the name. I could still remember the name, still see the name Lal Tiratan on one of those nooses. There was a trapdoor on the floor and a huge gear lever protruding from the floor with a console that you could open and trapdoor would fall out. The prison officer offered to open it for me, and I begged him not to. What struck me then was how deliberate and calculated that whole process of hanging somebody was. You know, it's all state action. They weigh them, they ask them what is the last food they want to eat. The whole room had a certain eeriness about it. But worse was to come. I then went to see death row. I think they must have shown me the worst one, because I think there were several rows of it. This one was a dungeon, a Game of Thrones dungeon. Those of us who have ever seen Game of Thrones, it was a dungeon. As I entered, all these condemned prisoners ran to the porthole. And one man shouted, "Is the Minister of National Security?" And I realized, they obviously lived in hope that the Minister of National Security had come like somehow to give him a pardon. But little did they know that I had come to see how best I could get them executed. It was a bit of a poignant moment. I was struck by how hopeless their lives were, how empty they had nothing. They would have to hold on to any hope. And these were human beings. They appeared to have been dehumanized. It was troubling. So I left that prison, chastened by what I saw, and convinced that the whole process had to be reformed. Unfortunately, I did not become a member of the BHB, but I now understood why their hearts bled. About 2 years later, I became Justice Bereaux, and death penalty cases came before me. In many respects, my friends at the bar, in the convocation hall, and you could say we renewed hostilities, but I was the judge then. By then, I was firmly of the belief that the death penalty, was not the way to go. It certainly was not the way to be applied indiscriminately without regard to the circumstances. But I kept my beliefs to myself. My view then and now remains the same. If you have a problem with the law, get it changed. But don't ask me as the judge to change it for you. My beliefs will have nothing to do with how I apply the law. And that is what I did in those death penalty cases. It is still, I find it a bit of a tragedy that we still have a mandatory death penalty. That's more than 30 years ago, some of those cases, and we still have a mandatory death penalty. We have people who kill in crimes of passion. I don't understand why that is still there, and of course, we all know that it's an existing law, and we know that existing law story. There's one more case I want to mention in my SG experience, and that was the case of the Attorney General and Knox Phillips. Most of us in the hall would have lived through that nightmare. Some of it started right here in the Hall of Justice. And this appeal, we have lived through the nightmare that led to this appeal. And some of it would have started right here in the hall on July 27th. I had been involved in the High Court matter and the Court of Appeal. When the judgment came out, I was in Washington doing my master's. The preparation for that High Court case was intense and stressful. But we had the evidence, and we were pretty sure that the pardon was invalid because the Muslimin continued to negotiate and to shoot even after they got the pardon. The local courts wouldn't listen in the first instance. In the Court of Appeal, it was 2-1 with Roger Hammersmith defending. We were ultimately successful before the board using the same evidence and the same arguments that we had used here. I remain convinced that with the exception of Justice of Appeal Hammersmith, who gave that dissenting judgment, our local courts let us down. And that was because they were afraid. After that decision, I made a mental note that should I ever become a judge, at the time I had no intention of being one, but should I ever become a judge, I would not decide a case because I'm afraid, no matter how much afraid I might be. I had to deal, when I became Justice Bereaux, with at least 2 or 3 sensitive cases where my safety could have been called in question. But I remembered my vow. And while I was dealing with that particular matter, there were other cases going on which were related. My brother judges who were doing those cases were walking around with 2 and 3 bodyguards. Nobody asked me whether I needed one. So I was walking around with my rosary. Nobody came to ask, and I did not ask. I am no hero. Bravery is not my strong point. But I made adjustments. I changed the times I got to work, the times I came home, the routes I took, and I avoided lonely places. But I know that and if I start giving in to intimidation and fear, which is what I think happened in that case, the legal system is compromised. I make these comments and I direct them in particular to the young judges who are now coming in. We cannot give in to intimidation. We cannot give in to fear. Today, Trinidad and Tobago is a lot more dangerous than when I became a judge in terms of public figure. But when I became a judge, as I said, I came in with my 2 eyes open. I was aware that there was risk to me, but I was quite prepared to take it for the sake of Trinidad and Tobago. As the Bible says, of whom much is given, much is expected. And in my view, if you want to earn tax-free salary and drive tax-free car, you have to take the risks with the benefits. You have to accept that risk. So when you're enjoying the benefits, driving on the priority, departure lounge, VIP departure lounge, remember that with it comes the burden of risk. If you can't accept the risk, do not accept the job. I tried my best to follow that mantra. I applied the law as I saw it, irrespective of my beliefs, irrespective of my fears, irrespective of what office you held, irrespective of who you were. Everybody was entitled to be treated the same. I tried my best to be as fair as I could. I always would say, I don't have to be right. I want to be right, and I will try to be right. But I have to be fair. And I think I tried my best to be fair. Court of Appeal, just a little more on the Court of Appeal, the High Court and Court of Appeal. My experience in the High Court was very much like my experience in the Solicitor General. We were a young cadre of bright judges, the Jamadars, Mendonças, Paulame Weeks, York Suhan, Maureen Raj Northley again, Smithy, Gregory Smith, Rajendra Narayan, then later on, Mira coming again to join us. All the judges of that era were fantastic. Chief Justice De La Vicide had come with an agenda to clear the backlog, and he was a bundle of energy. He was an inspiring leader. He led from the front, and of course, he was a brilliant mind. So we had an example to follow. We were young and enthusiastic, and we took it on. We had great camaraderie in the common room again, and that common room was an important part of the life of the judiciary. I remember when I started, I became a little unpopular with the registry people because I sat long hours, or sometimes 4 o'clock. And the younger people, some of the clerks had children to pick up at school. In those days, we were assigned to courts. The files were not assigned to judges, they were assigned to courts. and you went from court to court. Nobody, it came a time where in the registry clerks, none of them wanted to sit with me because I was sitting too late. But I understood. So a lot of them were single parents, or even if they weren't, but they had their kids to pick up at school. Sometimes I would adjourn to allow them to do that. But that was a fun time. I remember Paula May Weeks and Alice completing as much as 20 matters in a month. I think there was more than that, to my amazement. My numbers didn't get that high, I don't think. I was never into the numbers. I was more about getting my trials done and being fair. But to compensate, I would sit long hours and almost every day. My Court of Appeal stint was a lot more difficult. For starters, I had to share my space with 2 other judges. That was not easy. There were these huge mounds of paper that you had to go through. Huge mounds of paper. The evidence wasn't yours. It was already made. You had to read it. And then you had to share your quotas with these 2 judges. Some of them asking questions that I wouldn't have asked. And I'm trying to keep a straight face. Apparently, I failed miserably. Lots of people will tell me that after. But of course, I'm sure the same happened with them. Then you had to write your judgment. When I could write my judgment and give it up this morning, finish at 9 and give it at 10, I had to write my judgment in time for my brother judges to read it. Then some of them would have a problem with my style and want to change it. Then some would have a problem with what I said and disagree with me and want me to change my opinion. That led to quite a battle. Sometimes the battles got a little heated, quite heated. But it was all part of the life of being a Court of Appeal judge. You can't, we got along well, we were a tight bunch, but when it came to the law and to the writing of it, there were disagreements, and there were a lot of disagreements. A lot of the time we resolved it and we got unanimous decisions. But there were times when we felt strong enough that each of us would write our own. So I presided. It was an honor and a pleasure to preside and to create law as best as I could. I didn't start off that way. I didn't start off with intending to do that. But here we are. I am grateful and thankful for the opportunity, if I may say, and finally, to have served, and for the kind words that people have said. It is unreal, it is surreal that I really am retiring. As far as I'm concerned, retirement is for other people. It happens to other people, not to me. Getting old and getting to 70, not me. It's supposed to be my brothers, my cousins, my friends, other strangers. That is supposed to happen to me, unfortunately. but neither was major illness. At the end of the day, we are human, and we all have to go. I've seen others come and go, as I will come and go. I will go in faith. It is an uncharted area for me. For 28 years I have done this. For 28 years, my mind, even when I'm at home, would be consumed with judgment writing. It's something I was doing. If it wasn't judgment writing, it was when I was at the bar, it would be preparing. When I'm not writing, I'm thinking. Always taking over with work. Now that I'm not doing that, I don't have a clue what I'm going to do. Yes, I don't know where Sean, the Solicitor General, got the rumor about going to Tobago. But as much as I like Tobago, I may go to Erin and plant peas. But there's so many other things. Maybe there's charity. Trinidad has a lot of poverty, so I'm thinking of maybe trying to do some charitable work. Maybe I don't intend to give up law completely. I will have to continue to do some of it. I will continue to pray to God and to worship Him. and to go in faith and in hope. Whatever it is that comes up, He will be there to guide me. He will be there to provide me, as He has for the last 45 years as of public service and the last 28 years as a judge. So I thank everybody for coming. I thank my brothers and sisters for their support, and I go forward in faith and in hope. Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Registrar, please prepare a transcript of these proceedings to send to the Honourable Mr. Justice of Appeal Nolan Bereaux.
As your lordship pleases.
Thank you all for attending, and court will now adjourn. Have a good remainder of the day.